Part 1. The Reassertion of White Power. Quote from Jackson Lear's Rebirth of a Nation, page 96. In Rebirth of a Nation, historian Jackson Lears emphasizes how, after 1877, that is, the end of the Reconstruction period, race relations became rigidified, with consciousness of race difference becoming more entrenched. Othering was increasingly based on scientific theory aiming at demonstrating the biological underpinnings of racial categories. The belief in identity being premised on hereditary traits grew, strengthening the racial taxonomy that had begun to develop in the 1820s. The superiority of the white Anglo-Saxon race was now being asserted with more authority. 1.1. Post-Reconstruction Historical and Political Contexts. The Civil War was the cause of a genuine trauma. While the Reconstruction that was followed was material, with much of the Southern infrastructure having been destroyed during the bloody conflict, it was also psychological. The South not only had to reconcile with the North, it also had to adapt to a new way of life, to the new industrializing South, and to the free blacks who were no longer under strict control of the masters and planters. Freedmen had been granted the franchise in 1868 with the 14th Amendment, and opportunities to both vote and be elected, take part in Southern as well as Northern politics. Whereas this participated in black people's own sense of self-worth and self-representation, it was difficult for former planters and the white Southern elite to accept. As Southern Democrats slowly regained control of Southern legislatures in the 1870s, after the radical Republican Reconstruction era, they vowed to reduce the so-called power of black people and basically to keep the black man down. The reassertion of white power also took the form of the disenfranchising of black men by legal and extra-legal means and the rise of Jim Crow laws, leading to the official legalization of segregation in 1896 with the Plessy v. Ferguson Supreme Court verdict. The Lost Cause, a nostalgic ideology that entailed a revision of the history of the war and of its causes, would lead to the creation of new stereotypes that were propagated in the South as well as in the North. After 1877, date of the infamous Battle of Little Big Horn, in December 1890, the last of the Indian Wars at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota culturally and demographically terminated the Indians. As of 1868, as advised by an Indian Peace Commission, the reservation system became permanent. By 1880, 95% of the total remaining Indian population was living on reservations west of the Mississippi, watched over by the Federal Army, a form of containment of the savages. The Dawes Act, or General Allotment Act of 1887, instituted a distribution of land to Indians in exchange for citizenship. Reservations also afforded white land speculators great opportunities as Western expansion continued. Under this act, reservations were divided into individual land holdings by authority of the American president. Land was allotted to Indians, and the rest, or surplus land, was negotiated with native leaders to be sold to white settlers. Again, in line with the general Indian policy of assimilation, those Indians who received allotments were to become American citizens. Reservations broke the tribal systems, opened Indian land to white speculation, and made Indians dependent on the federal government for tools or food, pushing them to adopt Victorian morals and the value of progress. By 1900, there remained in the United States approximately 250,000 Indians living among some 76 million other people and distributed among 200 reservations on 72 million acres of land. By 1880, We should mention that the extinction of the buffalo on the plains contributed to the project of forced assimilation, leading Indians to turn to agriculture, a cash economy, and subsequently to relinquish self-sufficiency. In effect, 9 million buffalo were killed by white hunters between 1872 and 1874, sometimes leaving the carcasses to rot in the open air, only taking the fur. The reservation policy was clearly a form of ethnocide, an eradication of a culture. The general idea that the Indian, used in the collective and lumping all nations together, was fast disappearing, induced new forms of representations of this group. 1.2. The rise of social Darwinism and the hardening of scientific racism. In the late 19th century, social scientists used social Darwinism, eugenics, and measurement of intelligence as practiced by psychologists to assert the inferiority of the black race, and perhaps more importantly, to assert the superiority of the white race. Science was then paramount, and what scientists found was considered as truth. Social Darwinism, as imported by English sociologist Herbert Spencer, can be defined as the application or misapplication of Darwin's theories of the evolution of species to society and economy. Darwinian thought suffused various and diverse scientific fields and in turn led to philosophies, political and race theories that helped to sustain conservatism. Social Darwinism was used for several purposes, not least to justify racial theories, to assert a hierarchy of individuals and a hierarchy of races or ethnic groups. The struggle for existence and survival of the fittest became catchphrases that led to such interpretations. Society was, like nature, an organic entity where natural laws prevailed. We're not here talking about the natural laws of the 18th century, but such laws as precisely the struggle for existence. Logically, if only a few would ultimately survive according to the laws of nature, there was then no need for government or reformers to intervene in the process. Nature would prevail and harmony would ensue. Another corollary to social Darwinism was that if a struggle was necessary for society to progress, then racial conflict was natural and desirable. Along with social Darwinism, there developed all forms of evolutionary theories depending on the idea that societies and races mirrored natural biological species in their evolution. In this context, evolution was a synonym for progress, a central tenet of the Gilded Age. Thus would races and ethnic groups be seen as either capable or not capable of progressing towards the ultimate stratum of civilization embodied by the white or Caucasian male. Again, remember that Caucasian was an erroneous term coined by scientist Blumenbach in the 18th century on the basis of one unique cranium to designate white characteristics and hence the white race. Caucasian represented the apex of civilization.